here. Thank you, Chairperson. It seems that we didn't hear any or many constructive reasons to support this specific method of practicing or showing loyalty to God. They criticize our case. There are many other similar cases that are allowed in status quo. Our solution is not necessarily perfect to deal with this problem in status quo. And the only reason or logic from their side was for individual it is important. But how is it important and why is it important? We need to hear the reasons or rationale behind the practice. It is their burden to prove why that is important, other than saying for them it is important, therefore we should respect it. We need to hear logics and rhetorics or whatever explanation about it, and it's their burden of proof to show that. Based on this, I would like to address 3 issues in this debate. First of all, the context of this debate. What is the context of this debate? Secondly, who are the real victims of this practice? And number 3, what is the limit on religious freedom and autonomy? So first, what's the context of this debate? What we have heard from leader opposition is that, our context is very minor and rare and radical, and there are many other moderate contexts in which countervailing views about secular values are predominant. If, ladies and gentlemen, secular value is such predominant in many contexts, such as importance of human rights and liberty, there is no point or necessity of sticking to this old practice in the first place. Therefore, their harm has small impact in this debate if they support vast majority of moderate case representing the reality of the current religious community. Therefore, they are marginalizing their own argument by counter-contextualizing this debate. Secondly, if moderate context is a majority in this debate, then there is less likely to be backlash or criticism from the religious community. That is to say, moderate believers in the community will support rational discourse or discussion or dialogue between government and the community. Therefore, backlash is really less likely to happen. As a result of that, vast majority will accept intervention in government and new normative standard created by this policy. Therefore, the harm or practical harm is very less likely to occur if that's the context. Second logic from their side of the house is people do it anyway underground. It is control to this kind of practice that if that happens behind the scene. Firstly, we can drastically reduce such incident that happens behind the scene because of prosecution and conviction. After taking our proposal, it will be feasible for police institution or public prosecutor to make intervention and examine the facts, and the justice will be closed out. There will be a case that is conducted in a trial. Therefore, we can identify who are the real victims, who are not. This mechanism does not exist in the status quo, and this is a clear mechanism of why we can protect victims on our side of the house and reduce the number of underground incidents. Secondly, even if underground incident happens under our model after taking the proposal, that's fine because we can drastically make the number of incidents very smaller than the status quo. Under our proposal, the paradigm shift will occur. People no longer believe that self-harm is a normal religious practice. It was outdated, old-fashioned religious practice. So new generation, relatively liberal younger generation, will intergenerationally shift and alter their normative standard within the community. People no longer rely on this practice in order to show royalty. People will try to explore or develop any other methods to show their royalty or piousness to their community and God. Therefore, the necessity of this practice itself will be smaller and marginalized after taking our proposal. They need to address this paradigm shift that will happen intergenerationally. Number 3, people will be locked up in the community. So people have no mobility. People can't just opt out physically. No, the difference is now we have an option for legal prosecution, and the police officers are able to investigate the instances, and therefore at least we can protect the most vulnerable actors from exploitation by religious believers in the community. Moving on to the second clash points about who are the real victims of this debate. So we need to make a trade-off and comparison between exploited and coerced believers versus who really want to have this kind of practice and lose rights over those practices because of this proposal. So whose rights should be prioritized from the perspective of government in democracy? And this is the criteria we would like to compare in this debate. We would like to hear any counter standard of comparison from the other side of the house. So firstly, what we'd like to emphasize is individual harm is likely to become a collective harm or harm to other individuals as well. No, thank you. Only reason from Hirohito is that if individuals believe in a specific form of rituals and that's their choice, no, that becomes a collective action power and a peer pressure within the community. If the number of people who opt out of this kind of practice increases, the collective peer pressure accordingly increases, and that's the real problem we are trying to talk about in this debate. There are 3 responses from Hirohito about this, so I'm going to give you 3 responses back. Firstly, even if something is written in the text in Quran, people don't automatically believe in that people have option to opt out. No, once people publicly opt out of this option and disobey with what's written in Quran, that activity is regarded as blasphemous or sinful, hence are more likely to be persecuted within the community or discriminated within the community. Substantially, option doesn't exist for individual. Secondly, I would like to take my own information. Later. Later maybe. Second criticism is that our solution is not perfect. There are many other things that constitute coercion or forced choice in our society or in religious community. Yes, we concede our solution is not perfect, but just because solution is not perfect, it's not justification to let the harm to exist and continue to escalate. We believe the existence of potentiality escalates and inherently exacerbates the level of coercion and exploitation. Hence, the state has justification to step in and make intervention in order to especially protect the vulnerable individuals who are likely to be exploited. And that's the mechanism of labor protection in corporations and so on. Number 3, I will take you now. I really want to talk to you.
Hi. So at the end, what happens if we can prove that it's not going to be a coercive but it's a voluntary choice? Could you still tell us why it's still going to be a bad choice?
First, because it harms yourself, and the harm of which is beyond the initial expectation and control. That's the exact reason why we do not allow organ transportation, profit, commercial surrogate motherhood, suicide, and euthanasia. Initial consent generates a harm beyond the expectation or beyond initial prediction, and individuals have propensity to prioritize short-term loyalty over the long-term consequences. The situation is which state has authority and discretion to make intervention. Moving on to the final flashpoints about limit on religious freedom and autonomy. What we'd like to emphasize here is that religion is a public institution, just like a corporation or political party, and that those public institutions are oftentimes subject to many restrictions, because within a closed community, showing the loyalty clouds out and escalates rationality of individual, and there's a high propensity of that behavior pattern. Hence, state can possibly intervene and compromise autonomy of those institutions. They need to show why religion is a private institution or completely private and independent from any other kinds of restrictions that already impose on public institutions like corporation and so on. We are happy to propose. Thank you.